Looking at this pre-industrial map, Europe was a fragmented patchwork of isolated microregions. Before the 19th century, most people lived and died within miles of their birthplace. Identities were strictly local. You weren't German or Italian, but belonged to a specific village. Then came the steam engine and the rise of the first industrial factories. These powerful new machines produced enormous quantities of goods at relentless speeds. Almost immediately, the staggering physical scale of early industry collided with the tiny, confined borders of the old agricultural world. A single facility packed with acres of machinery could churn out more textiles in a week than a local town could consume in a year. And keeping those furnaces burning required mountains of coal and iron. Moving those raw materials and finished goods meant navigating a nightmare of local trade tariffs, conflicting regional laws, and deeply rutted dirt roads that changed jurisdiction every few miles. Industrialization is an economic system that requires massive, uninterrupted territorial reach to survive. Europe's heavily fractured map was keeping this booming new economy in a cage. To keep the machines running and prevent these new engines of wealth from choking on their own surplus, the physical boundaries of the continent had to be forcefully redrawn. The factories demanded highly concentrated labor. Millions of people left the quiet isolation of their family farms to operate the looms and furnaces of the new industrial centers. Suddenly, strangers from dozens of scattered valleys, people who spoke completely different regional dialects, were packed tightly together in booming urban hubs. Working side by side on the factory floor and navigating crowded streets meant these workers had to adapt. They learned to communicate, cooperated to survive the harsh conditions, and slowly let go of their hyper-local village identities. The industrial city acted as a sociological pressure cooker. It took diverse rural populations and compressed them until a new shared identity formed. Guiding this massive shift was a newly minted demographic, the middle class. These were the managers, merchants, and engineers who directed the industrial system. Unlike peasant farmers who lived entirely off the land right outside their doors, this new class relied entirely on the seamless movement of goods, capital, and ideas across vast distances. To sustain their wealth, they financed an explosive expansion of physical infrastructure. They laid down thousands of miles of railways, expanded shipping lanes, and strung up communication lines across the continent. Because of this infrastructure, a localized coal shortage 300 miles away could immediately halt production in a city textile mill, threatening a manager's livelihood. Millions of people who would never meet face-to-face were now locked together in a highly sensitive, continent-spanning economic web. This emerging middle class quickly realized that a continent carved into dozens of tiny, competing regional governments was completely incapable of managing such a complex system. They required specific logistical tools, larger consumer markets, a single standardized currency, and infrastructure that connected seamlessly. Erasing local borders meant goods could finally flow freely, without the constant drag of border checks or delays. This push for political unity served as a cold, calculated prerequisite for industrial business to function. Modern nationalism emerged as a functional requirement of industrial growth. Citizens were now physically linked by railways. They were economically dependent on the same broad markets, and they were socially blended together in rapidly expanding cities. These elements forged a powerful, shared sense of economic purpose. Ethnic groups and regional factions that had spent centuries divided were suddenly cooperating under a broad new banner of national identity. This common purpose permanently redrew the political map. It consolidated hundreds of isolated microregions into the massive, powerful nation-states that define modern Europe. The Industrial Revolution's infrastructure manufactured the borders, shared purpose, and identity of the modern nation-state.